It's the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 156. And this is your host, Chris Blanchard. After starting out in 2008 on a homestead in the country that grew to a market and livestock farm on several different parcels, my guest, Steven Beltram, and his wife, Becca Nestler, moved Balsam Gardens to two large parcels right in the city of Asheville, North Carolina. They now farm on 30 acres of certified organic ground, selling their produce to wholesale distributors. Steven digs into how he has developed a large, efficient farm without any infrastructure. At Balsam Gardens, the crew field packs all of the crops. And Steven explains how they do this in a way that has helped them pass their GAPS audit while maintaining good quality. We also discuss Balsam Gardens' plasticulture system, including how they manage weeds between the plastic-covered beds. And Steven shares how they've worked to structure their crops and their labor pool to maximize their efficiency. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is generously supported by Vermont Compost Company, founded by organic crop growing professionals committed to meeting the need for high-quality compost and compost-based living soil mixes for certified organic plant production. VermontCompost.com. And by High Mowing's Organic Seeds, the first independently owned, farm-based seed company proudly serving professional organic farmers with a full line of 100% certified organic and non-GMO project-verified vegetable, herb, flower, and cover crop seeds. highmowingseeds.com/farmer to farmer. And by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are versatile, maneuverable in tight spaces, lightweight for less compaction, and easy to maintain and repair on the farm. Gear-driven and built to last for decades of dependable service, bcsamerica.com. Steven Beltram, welcome to the Farmer to Farmer podcast. Really happy that you could join us today. I'd like to start off, as we usually do, by having you tell us about your farm, Balsam Gardens, where you guys are located, how much you're farming, how you guys are selling it.
Okay, so we're located in Asheville, North Carolina, which is a mountainous area. It's in the western part of the state. So that puts us in, zone 6A, they've been saying. We're probably nudging up now, although this winter's been cold. But we actually started the farm in 2007 or 8. 2008 really, I guess, when we first started going to farmers market. About 45 minutes west of Asheville. We bought an old homestead out there, 1800s kind of house and 3 acres. So we started on a 16th of an acre in the front yard and just started going to the small town local farmers market. And here about 10 years later, we've moved to Asheville. So now we're actually fully in the city limits of Asheville. But we're farming on about 30 acres of certified organic land. And we're wholesaling everything. And at this point, it's all vegetables. So we're not doing any animals, although we've done that quite a bit in the past.
30 acres of organic produce in the city. That's not your typical urban farming setup.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty unique. It's kind of it's kind of weird the way it worked out. We wanted more land and we had to move into the city and leave the country to get it. So like I said, we're in the mountains. So we have we're on 2 different watersheds, but the way it works out is we're in those floodplain riparian areas on the sides of, in one case, a river, and on the other field, a pretty large creek. So we're farming in land that's not developable. And so that's how we ended up with it. One of the properties we purchased in 2014, and that was really the impetus for us to move. It's actually 34 acres, but I think I can till about 20. And the other property is actually owned by the city of Asheville, and we lease it from them. And I guess that's about 10 acres of tillable land. So that's how that kind of worked out.
And then you said that you're selling all of your produce wholesale. What kinds of markets are you selling your produce into?
So the thing that we've done the past 3 years is there's a company in a town right next to Asheville called New Sprout Organic Farms. And they started out farming, I guess around the same time we did, but they've transitioned over to being just focusing on distribution and I guess commingling products and stuff like that. So So we've partnered with them the past 3 years since we moved. And everything has gone through their warehouse, and then they handle the marketing end of it. So they're selling it to, the major grocery stores. And that's the way we've managed to sell produce, because we don't have any infrastructure on our farm. It's just floodplain land at this point. So we've got no pack shed. We don't even have electricity or potable water. So that partnership has really made it so that we can sell our stuff. And then this year we're taking on we're going to be partnering with a couple other companies doing a similar thing, just so that we have a little bit of diversification in our marketing strategy. But that's the way we've managed to do that.
So when you say you don't have any infrastructure on your farm, no potable water, how are you getting your crops clean enough to go to market? How does that even work?
So the way that works is that we field pack everything. Everything that we're growing right now is on plastic. So we're doing plasticulture for everything. So that helps keep things pretty clean. And then we field pack all the produce. So if we're bunching kale, the way that works is our crew's out there harvesting kale. They're piling the bunches in the middles on the clean plastic between we've got 2 rows of kale. So they're piling the bunches in the middles. And then someone else is coming through and putting that stuff directly into a wax box. And then when it goes back to our buyer's warehouse, it runs through a really simple hydro cool line, which is just like a conveyor belt with some water sprayers on top, and then it gets iced. So we're not really washing anything at all.
Does that affect the selection of crops that you're growing?
It does. So, we're not doing really any root vegetables. We're going to do some this year for a small local company that we used to work with a lot in the past. They're good friends, and they do grocery home delivery. So we're going to grow some carrots and beets and stuff for them, and they're actually going to wash them themselves. But yeah, for the larger wholesale market, we focus on things that are growing above ground. So we're focused on leafy greens and lettuce, like head lettuces. We're not doing, like baby leaf lettuce that you got to wash 3 times or anything. And then fruiting crops. And, if we're picking squash or tomatoes or something like that, and they have a little bit of, we try to wash them as little as possible, but if they're a little bit dirty, then we just wipe them off with paper towels before we put them in the box.
It's such a different approach than specifically what we took on our farm, which was, everything got washed, everything left the farm extremely, extremely clean. And so it's really interesting to me. And I know that when we experimented with field packing, it was a complete disaster.
Yeah. When we started our farm, I did the same thing. Like I said, we were at our 3-acre homestead site. We had a little garage off the side, and I put in this 3-hole sink and the CoolBot walk-in cooler and all that. And we ended up with, I don't know, like 5 locations around there, but everything came back there and got washed, like you're saying. But we really had to figure out a different way of doing it, because we just don't have any way to do that on our farm the way it is right now. Yeah, and even on the farm that we purchased, the city has some flood ordinances that make it highly restricted for building anything at all, and so we just haven't been able to work out the kinks of putting in any sort of infrastructure at this point.
Now, when you're harvesting those crops out in the field and then moving them to the distributor, are you using a refrigerated truck or anything like that to start removing the field heat? Or is it just are you guys just packing stuff up and really relying on your wholesale distributor to cool stuff down for you?
Yeah, we have a 20-foot refrigerated truck, and that's ours now. When we first started, actually, they owned the truck, and they came to our field and got the stuff and took it back. Now the way we do it is that we own the truck, and it's refrigerated, and we haul the stuff to their warehouse, and then our staff handles all the post-harvest handling also in their warehouse. So yeah, we get a little bit of field heat off, but a lot of it is also just time management. I mean, we can't harvest lettuce past, usually 10 a.m. We usually try to get out of crops like kale even by lunch. And so that also affects our crop selection, in the sense that I try to have some fruiting crops or something like squash that we can pick in the afternoon to keep my crew going past noon working. My crew likes to work from about 6 a.m. till 3:30. So we try to have some afternoon jobs, by crop selection in that way.
Again, to kind of just keep talking about that harvest and the post-harvest handling aspect of it, have you gone through a GAPS audit? Has that been a requirement of New Sprout and these other distributors that you're working with?
Yep, we're GAP certified. Started out just USDA GAP or whatever they call it, and now last year we went to harmonized, and next year it looks like we probably, because we're going to be working with a new buyer that requires global or GFSI equivalent anyway. So we might even be doing a Primus audit. So, yep, we're doing the GAP thing for sure.
And so I think about, again, you said you guys don't have any potable water on the farm. How are you handling things like, I think about those most fundamental requirements like hand washing and bathroom sanitation. How are you guys managing that on your farm?
So we use portable toilets, and we contract with a local company to do that, just like you would on a construction site or whatever. So that part's just handled by them. And then the hand washing stations, we just use those blue water jugs, that have you lay them on their side, and you can turn the handle open and the water flows, and then you can turn it back and it turns off.
Yep.
So we just haul in potable water for hand washing and for drinking water and for washing, for cleaning tools and stuff. And then I use those IBC totes to haul in water for spraying.
You say IBC totes. That's those are those big pallet-sized plastic water totes, right?
You got it. They hold like 275 gallons, and I fill those up at a well that we have access to down the road. So one of the fields that we're at now that we're actually giving up this year has a well nearby. The same owners that we leased the field from own the well, so they've been letting us use that water for spraying. So I haul that in. Or one of my irrigation pumps that I'm pumping out of the river with has a chlorinator on it, so I can use that for spraying as well. But that's the way we handle that. Yeah, because we need to have potable water for spraying as well.
And of course, you have to have the potable water for hand washing, because obviously you don't want to be washing your hands in that's contaminated in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly. And then our harvest buckets and stuff, we wash them back at our buyer's warehouse, the way we've been doing that. Yeah, so the new farm that we're moving into, I've been toying with the idea of putting in a water meter. We could do it, but we'll see where we go with that.
Yeah. That's going to be, interesting to think about that living in the city. My experience with farming has almost all been rural, and being able to make those decisions about, I'm going to drill a well or whatever without it really having to pay any consideration to zoning laws or things like that. But I guess farming in Asheville, you don't have options like that.
Yeah, we could drill a well, and but that would cost more than putting in a water meter right now. So I don't know. A well would probably cost $8,000, and putting in a water meter with one of those frost-free hydrants, I think would cost a little over $3,000. So, and because we're irrigating out of surface water, it's not like we need volume of water. It's really just for hand washing and drinking.
I do a lot of work in the area of food safety and education for farmers around that. And I know that this hand washing requirement is something. So, two things about it. First, I think it's the most important thing that you can do on the farm in terms of actually having an impact on food safety, right? Because people's hands touch everything, good, bad, and indifferent. And so I'm interested in exactly what kind of a setup you've got. So you said you've got like a blue jug it's got a little twisty knob on it so that you can open up the water so the water's flowing over somebody's hands. And what else do you have with that setup? Because obviously just rinsing your hands and having that water drain out into the field is not sufficient.
Yeah, okay. So it's the things that we have right now, it's like a little stand. If you can picture 4 2x4s with a little plywood top on it. And then on top of that, there's a couple 2x4s sticking up with, I guess what was probably a 20-gallon blue plastic barrel cut in half. So it's kind of got like a little lid on top of it. And then, so the water jug sits on that platform, and then there's a soap dispenser mounted on the front of the platform as well. And it's, just one of those plastic ones that you put the, flexible plastic soap bags in, and you push it and the soap comes out.
Right.
And then underneath that, it's just it's like a piece of 1/2-inch pipe held on with a couple hose clamps, and that holds some paper towels. And then there's a trash can next to it. And we keep those things, they're not in the field. So all of our fields are kind of, I guess, small enough or broken up enough that there's always some area, like we set up a designated break area, and those things are, always 15 or 20 or 30 feet from any actual, well, probably more like 30 feet from any actual production areas, usually on the other side of a farm road or something like that. And so we don't have those things, out in the middle of the field.
Right.
And then we have a bucket, underneath that we can collect the water from. And we just, I don't know if you're really supposed to do this, but we just dump it, like make sure we're dumping it far away from the break area and the production area in the woods or whatever. And that's that.
In a place where people aren't going to be walking through and getting that water on their boots and then tracking it into the field.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I just think it's interesting how you've made this all work in a setup that doesn't include a lot of infrastructure, right? I mean, I think it's pretty elegant that you've got something that's satisfying the auditors and is clearly going to meet any of the requirements for the produce safety rule when that's coming into effect for you guys. And that's, I don't know, not just, yeah. So I just think that's nice and smooth, and I like
really
hearing
simple,
about it.
Yeah, and because we're field operations only, our gap audit is probably a lot simpler than someone who's trying to manage a warehouse packing facility as well. The auditors kind of look at those two things as separate operations, which, they are in our case.
Right.
And so, so the field operations requirements are, well, they're pretty straightforward. Yeah. But, it's wash your hands. Don't drop your boxes in puddles, stuff like that.
How long have you guys been going through the GAPS auditing process?
We did our first gap audit in 2015. So that was when we moved our farm. So 2015, we scaled up quite a bit, and we switched over to, we'd already been wholesaling a lot, but we switched over to the more commercial side of wholesaling, larger grocery stores and stuff, right. Through this distributor we're talking about. And that's when we started it on the gaps. And we weren't actually certified organic before then either. We were just farming organically. But since all of our markets were farmers market and CSA and local restaurants and small local grocers, that we weren't required to have all these certifications for those kind of buyers.
Right. But once you start getting further away on the distribution chain, you really do have to have that, because that's the only way that a consumer can have assurance that you're doing the practices that they think that you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely the only way to sell it as organic and get, the price that you need to farm this way. And then the food safety stuff is just, it's been like a tidal wave over the past few years where buyers are really requiring it in a big way around here, and the buyers themselves are getting stricter and stricter. I mean, we've had some buyers ask us to get more water tests than we normally do and stuff like that. So we'll see where it all goes.
I think it's going to be one of the interesting effects as a produce safety rule comes into effect is they more and more buyers, even for growers who aren't subject to the rule, are probably going to be pushing for compliance with the rule, whether we like it or not.
Yep. I'd say that, you're not going to get into a chain grocery store without some sort of food safety certification, at all in the near future, if not already now.
What kind of changes did you have to make in your operation? And I think it's interesting, especially because you do just have the field side of things. What kind of changes did you have to make that change to, I guess, both certified organic and to get the USDA GAPS audit and pass that?
A lot changed when we moved. So, but how much really changed, specific to the organic certification? I'd say not much changed on our production methodologies, but just specific for that. I definitely started taking field record keeping seriously. I'd been pretty lackadaisical about that in the past. But, as far as, the sort of our approach to farming and any sort of materials and stuff that we use, I'd say that nothing on that end changed for organic certification. For GAP certification, again, I'd say the biggest thing that changed is the record keeping. We have to keep all kinds of log books and things that in the past I didn't do any of that. So, I'm trying to think about what else might have changed specific for that. And but just a lot changed when we moved the farm. So we started being able to make sure that we separated our animal. We don't have an animal operation now, but we did have one for the first couple of years after we moved to Asheville. We've made sure to keep that a lot more separate.
Well, let's talk about making that change, because you started farming in 2008, and then you make this move to Asheville in 2013, right?
15 is the first year we farmed in Asheville.
Okay. I mean, and it seems like from what you've said that you really went from being a rural farm doing direct marketing to consumers to making this transition to being an urban farm on a larger scale, marketing your product primarily to wholesale distributors. Can you talk a little bit about how and why that arc happened at Balsam Gardens?
So when we were in Balsam, which is where the farm started, that's the rural area we're talking about. We were going to farmers markets. There was 2 towns nearby, so we were going to 2 farmers markets, really 3 a week, but 2 locations, as well as doing the CSA and selling to restaurants and all that. And at a certain point, we just kind of maxed out our local sales potential. So, our farmers market after a year or 2 plateaued. Let's tell the story like this. In 2008 and 9, it was just a part-time gig for me and my wife. So, I was doing construction full-time, and we had, our market garden was like a 16th of an acre. So our first farmers market, we sold some soil blocks in April or whatever, made $30 and thought that was awesome. So that's kind of where we started with it. And we just kept going to those markets. In 2010 is the first year that I started farming, full time during the season. So I was still doing construction in the winter, and my wife Becca had a job at that time as well. And so 2008 and 9, we started the farm for sure, but we only sold like $1,300 worth of stuff. So it was a small enterprise, mostly a home garden that we were selling excess from. 2010, the construction industry really fell apart. So So that's why I decided to, make the garden a little bit bigger and actually try farming full time. It was always kind of a dream, but I didn't think it was possible to make a living this way. So that was the impetus to try it, having no work for the first time ever in construction. And then we just kept getting bigger. So, 2010, we had a half acre and of vegetables, and I started raising some broiler chickens and stuff. And 2011, I don't know, we leased some more land from a neighbor and we raised more chickens and started raising turkeys and some pigs and made our gardens bigger. And so our last year at that location was 2014, and we were up to 4 locations with about 5 acres of vegetables, and we were raising, I don't know, maybe 1,200 broilers a year on pasture and a few hundred turkeys and 20 or 30 pigs. And I'd say that the biggest thing that changed is when we found this land. We kept wanting more land. I wanted to expand the operation a little bit, but we were having a hard time collecting like any nice, decent sized tracts where we were at. A lot of it had to do with topography. There just isn't a lot of large, flat pieces of ground, especially in the county that we were in at the time. And a lot of that is like old family land. People, they might be doing nothing but haying on it, but they don't want anything to change. They want it just the way it is. So we spent about a year and a half in communication with the seller of the land that we purchased in Asheville, kind of negotiating with her. And we had one failed attempt to buy it as soon as we found it. And then about a year and a half later, we finally purchased it. So that's really what drove us to move, was finding, 34 acres of bottom ground all in one contiguous location.
Okay.
I was kind of tired of farming on 5 different places. I wanted to farm in one place. That's not what ended up happening. Now we're farming in multiple locations again, but
it's hard.
That's just kind of what happened. Yeah.
And why the marketing change? What prompted you to go from doing those kind of direct to consumer sales to selling to wholesale distributors? That's a pretty big change.
Yeah. So even at our previous locations, the side of our business, I'd say, the last maybe 2 years that we were in that location and we were still doing the CSA and the farmers markets and all that, the only part of our marketing side of our business that was actually expanding was our local. I mean, it was still direct sales to, local companies, but our wholesale side of it. So like the local grocers and home delivery service and all that kind of stuff. That was the only side where we could get any growth in sales. Like we couldn't get more CSA members. In fact, our CSA started declining in membership. And the farmers market sort of plateaued. So we were already accustomed to doing, some wholesale. And then the switch to the more, bigger commercial type wholesale really had to do with the fact that we didn't have a packing storage facility. So when we set up this partnership with New Sprout, it closed that link for us, where we were trying to figure out, well, how, without any buildings or storage or potable water, how are we going to sell our stuff? And I couldn't even really figure out how to put together a CSA that way, So yeah, I'd say that was our biggest motivator to go that direction.
But making that sort of a change has a pretty big impact on your economics. I mean, you're really changing the prices that you're getting for the product when you go from selling to direct to consumer, even changing from selling to restaurants and local stores to selling to a wholesale distributor. Did you guys really sit down and pencil that out as part of the decision-making process?
Yeah, we knew that the numbers had to work. Our buyer, who's acting as our marketing agent, they're taking a revenue split. So we are giving up some money in that way. But the price point that you can get from retailers in our area for organic produce is actually, the same or even higher than you can often get from restaurants and stuff. In our area, the restaurants, that industry isn't really paying much of a premium. And so yes, some of the prices are going to be lower, but the volume is so much more. Instead of delivering, 2 cases of something, we want to deliver 150 cases of that same thing in a day,
Right.
So yeah, we had to, the numbers have to work. But I think that the increased efficiency of growing less things on a larger scale has really worked out to make it so that those lower prices, are fine.
Where have you gotten those efficiencies? Is that just from not having to train a crew on 40 different crops?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. It's the other thing is that we're paying our crew now by the hour, whereas previously we were doing the intern type program, so we were housing people and all that kind of stuff and trying to provide. We were providing more than just a job, but our payroll numbers were a lot lower. But we, like most everybody in the business, we still weren't really making very much money in that way. And so yeah, I think that the efficiencies of getting that volume done, not having the training is part of it. And part of it is, when you go out there and you harvest kale for 4 hours straight, you can get a lot more done, per minute than if you're switching tasks, 18 times in a 4-hour period. So I think that's most of where the efficiency comes in. And then also being on a larger scale, we've gotten into a lot more mechanization. So that has made a big difference as well.
When you say you've gotten into more mechanization, what does that look like?
Well, we're doing everything with, 4-wheel tractors now. When we started, I had a rototiller, and then, I went to the walk behind Grillo kind of thing. And now we're doing things with tractors, we switched everything over to plasticulture. So our weed management and our watering is a lot more labor efficient. We're taking wagons through the field when we're harvesting. So we're moving the product out of the field on shaded wagons. And, so we're moving, we can put like 200 cases on a wagon and move it all out of the field at once and load it on the truck. So, our weed management is basically just like cultivating the middles between the plastic. Maybe we have to hand weed the holes like one time, but we're not, my crew's not out there hoeing all day.
Right. That probably makes them happy.
That makes them happy. Yeah. I mean, ideally they plant and harvest, and that's what the crew does. And we do a minimal weeding. We're spraying with a tractor, a Jacto Cannon sprayer, as opposed to, I used to spray with pump backpack sprayers. So you can imagine how much time that would take to cover any ground. So yeah, that's what I mean by mechanization.
Now, are you doing any mechanical harvesting of crops?
We are not. Everything is harvested by hand.
Which, given the crops that you mentioned, I was assuming that was the case. Are you using anything like a veg conveyor system or anything like that to get stuff out of the field?
Nope, I don't have anything like that. It's something I've thought about before. I don't know how hard it would be to move that thing around the city.
Oh, yeah, I guess there is that, right? I mean,
yeah. So everything is just, like I said, we hand harvest it and we put it in boxes, and then we hand the boxes up to the wagon, and that keeps them in the shade too, so that's an important aspect of that wagon system. But
tell me about the covered
but
wagon.
It's all handled by hand.
Tell me about that covered wagon. What does that look like? Because that seems like, again, for you guys, anything that you can do to keep from adding heat after you've harvested has got to be just critical because you don't have the cooling facilities right there on the farm.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it's incredible the way that, a box of kale that was, boxed up at, 7:30 in the morning at 11 o'clock is still cold on the inside if you stick your finger in there, if you can keep the thing in the shade. So what we do is we've got hay wagons. I've got a couple of them, like one at each location where we're harvesting. I keep one there. And I've gone through several iterations of how to do shade structures on it, starting with wood and like building a wooden roof over it with a tarp. And what I've switched to now that I like the best is, see if I can describe it. I'm standing right next to it now. I drilled holes in it with a hole saw in the side, and then I put a metal pipe sticking down through it, sticks down about 8 inches, and with a bottom on it. Instead of one of the caps, you screw on one of those, a reducer so that the water can come out.
Right.
And then on the top there's a plate, and then I've got that bolted down to the wagon, and then in that pipe I can stick the top rail for a chain link fence, and then I got those 90s for the chain link fence. So I just made a U-shaped structure, 3 of them on that wagon, okay. and then we just put a tarp over top of that.
So it's almost
like lightweight, and it's like a hoop house. Yep.
Almost like a hoop house, right? Yeah, that seems like a nice, easy, logical thing to do.
Yeah, the wood kept coming apart. Like, that thing it moves a lot when you drive, and the screws in the wood would fall apart. And by the end of the season, I'd have a huge mess. And this is a lot more lightweight, so I'm pretty satisfied with it. I need to replace some of those plates that I screwed down with through bolts, and that'll make this thing even better. But yeah, and then that tarp, we throw it on in the morning. And then it can come right off. So when we're loading the truck, you can just pull that tarp off and get it out of your way.
Oh, really? Oh, that's kind of slick. And I guess that way too, when you leave those wagons parked, you're not having to worry about high winds grabbing onto a tarp that's secured to the wagon and blowing it over or something like that.
Exactly. Yep. It's just, they kind of, when we need it to stay put, if there's a little bit of wind while we're harvesting, they just take the strapping from, the wax boxes come in those bundles, and there's that plastic strapping.
Yep.
They just use pieces of those to tie it onto those rails temporarily. And that's how we keep it on there when it's a little bit windy. Otherwise, it can just kind of sit on there.
Right.
And then at the end of the day, or when we're done harvesting, we take it off. And the other thing I like about that is that it allows rain and sunshine and stuff to get on those hay wagons. So, it's pretty hard for me to hose a piece of equipment like that down because I don't really want to use river water for that. So,
all right, Steven, with that, we're going to stop here, take a break, get a quick word from a couple of sponsors, and then we'll be right back with Steven Beltram from Balsam Gardens in Asheville, North Carolina. Perennial support for the Farmer to Farmer podcast is provided by Vermont Compost Company. I used Vermont Compost Sport B as a blocking mix and potting soil for over 12 years on my farm, and we grew great transplants with it year after year in soil blocks and in traditional cell-flats. We even grew rosemary plants in pots for multiple years, a real testament to the structure of the soil, which can keep the microbes alive over an extended period of time and provide good aeration for the roots. When you put plants in containers, whether it's a 5-year-old rosemary in a 20-gallon nursery can or a 24-day-old lettuce seedling in a 10-20 cell tray, you need an optimized matrix of materials that can provide a healthy plant with a restricted media volume. Vermont Compost potting soils provide just that consistently, year after year. VermontCompost.com. The podcast is also supported by High Mowing Organic Seeds. When your livelihood depends on the quality of your seeds, be confident in your investment. When you grow organically, you need to know that your seeds were selected to perform in organic conditions. High Mowing offers professional quality seeds grown by organic farmers for organic farmers. Visit High Mowing online to request a free copy of their 2018 seed catalog, read about the company's mission, and browse over 700 organic varieties, including tried and true market standards, all new high-performance hybrids, and beloved heirlooms. Use the code F2FSEEDS when you purchase online, or mention the code when you call to receive a 10% discount on purchases of $100 or more. Visit highmowingseeds.com/farmer to farmer or call 866-735-4454 to get started. And we're back with Steven Beltram from Balsam Gardens in Asheville, North Carolina. Steven, what's the weather like down there? How are things going here late in January in Asheville?
Well, today we're in the 40s and it's sunny. Yesterday was 55 and sunny, and then dipping down into the 20s at night. But we've had, for us, we've had some actual cold this year. In early January and late December, we got into the single digits several times. And, in December, we had maybe 8 inches of snow. So we've had a couple snows happen. So past several years, it seems like it hardly ever gets into the teens. So, but around here, the wintertime always is, you always have those warm days up in the 50s, and every now and then you get into the 70s, not every year, but
you're not doing any production at this time of year, are you?
We are not. So, everything we're doing is in the field, so we don't have any high tunnels or anything right now. And I don't even start my own plant right now. So we've got right now, what I do this time of year is, been doing plenty of book work. And then today I'm at the farm loading up trailers of equipment, working on moving out of a farm that we're finished leasing now. So just kind of staging the scene for next year.
Now, we've talked some already today about the plasticulture setup that you've got on your farm. Can you describe a little more about how that works from beginning to end? I mean, what kind of tillage are you doing ahead of the plastic? How are you getting it laid? And then kind of what happens as we go through the season with it?
Yeah. So depending on how big our cover crop is, or if there's a cover crop at all. Usually I have a good cover crop in the winter, but some of our fields this year I seeded too late, and then it got so cold that they're open. So anyway, we come in a case like that, we'll come in with a disc harrow. If I've got a lot of residue that I need to deal with, then I'll mow it down and I'll run a turning plow through there, like a bottom plow. I have a 4-bottom plow that can do that. And then I usually don't have to. Our fields are light enough, and they're all kind of sandy loam, that in most of our fields, I don't have to use a rotavator before I lay plastic. I can get by with just the disc harrow. So I've got a 9-foot 3-point hitch disc harrow, a finishing type harrow. I don't have a offset harrow at all. And that can usually get things broken up and smooth enough to run that better through. So then after I disc harrow, I usually drive through and lay out my beds. So most of our beds are, most of our pattern, I'm thinking about standardizing the pattern, but we've been running on 2 patterns. One pattern is 7 beds per drive row, and then another pattern we use is 9 beds per drive row, and those are crop specific. So crops that are taller, like tomatoes, trellis crops, or things like squash that really have a lot of foliage, we'll do 7 because of the mechanics of how far our sprayer can get in there. And then something like kale or cabbage, we've been doing on 9 because that sprayer can blast all the way to the middle of the 4.5 beds or whatever.
Right.
And so I lay out the beds by driving the tractor back and forth. And the reason I do that is because then I have a fertilizer applicator. It was an old machine made by Palkit, but it was made for gypsum. A friend of mine picked it up in southern Georgia for me, really cheap. And then so it's 12 feet wide. So centered on the back of the tractor, it covers a bed and then half of a bed on either side. And then we put these plates on the bottom so that it's just dropping the fertilizer into the beds and not into the tire tracks. And so that's the reason why we lay them out first, is so that I can accomplish that. Because it's only doing a half bed on either side. So you have to come back, you skip a bed and then come back and drive the other way.
Yep.
So that's what we do next. And then we come through and we run the bedder. And I just have one of those little, red ones. I think they're made by Nolks. So it's not a real tall bed. I originally bought that because they're cheap for getting the bed layer, and they could run on a smaller tractor. At this point, I think I'd like to have one that makes a taller bed, but I don't. So that lays the plastic out, puts the drip tape underneath it, lays the plastic and buries both ends. Now you've got your plastic beds out there, and then we just use blue lay flat, and we use some of that black polyline for headers, and we just go through and hook it all up, and we can water quite a bit at once with a system like that. So then we're pumping out of the river. So we've got an irrigation rig. Well, I've got a couple of them, and they're on trailers, so they're mobile, and we just back it up to where we need it to be in the river, drop a pipe in, and then on those irrigation rigs, on all of them, there's a pump, obviously, and then the sand media filters. One of them has a chlorinator on it because of the river there. We kept failing water tests, and then they've all got those Mazzy injectors, so we can pump whatever we want into there.
So that if you need some extra fertility during the year, you can run. What kinds of things are you running through there?
I'd say, I don't do a lot of fertigation. Most of our fertility is provided through that pre-plant application of granular stuff. But the thing that I use really consistently is potassium sulfate or sulfate of potash, however you say it. I use that in my tomatoes because they need so much potassium. So, when we're growing tomatoes, we're putting in, once they start to fruit, I'm putting in a bag of that 0052 to the acre per week. But I don't do a lot with fish emulsion, or I don't do much with, Chilean nitrate or any of that sort of stuff. I can, but I don't do much of that. So that's I'd say that potassium sulfate's the main thing that we regularly use, and it's really only on tomatoes.
And then once you've got that all set up, so now you got the plastic laid, the drips underneath, you've got your irrigation setup working. How are you actually getting the plant into the plastic?
So we're using the green water wheel. What's it?
The rain flow, right?
The rain flow.
Yeah.
Yep. We use a rain flow water wheel, and we put them in that way. So, except for, we transplant everything except for cucurbits. So when we're doing cucurbits, I just take the wheel off of the water wheel and the axle, and I stick it through the 3-point hitch in the tractor, and put a hose clamp on either end, and I can poke holes that way, and then we come through and direct seed the cucurbits. But yeah, otherwise we're transplanting with that water wheel.
Where are you growing your transplants?
So we buy them all, or we have someone contract grow them for us, I guess is a better way of saying it, because we have to pre-order them. So there's a company called Banner Greenhouses that's I guess they're about 45 minutes east of us, and they've got a large greenhouse operation, and primarily what they do and have done is like they grow like flowers in pots that end up at Lowe's and things for homeowners. But they started several years ago doing organic transplants, and so that's worked out well for us. We tell them what we want and when we want it, and then they deliver them to the field, and we plant them.
I mean, that's a whole nother management headache that you're not having to deal with.
That's right, and a whole nother infrastructure,
right?
Set of infrastructure that we don't have.
Now, once you get those crops out in the field, are you covering with row cover or with clear plastic or anything like that for crop protection or for moving things along more quickly?
No. Well, we've got one field where there's enough crows over there that I do cover some things sometimes just to keep the crows off till the plants are established.
Interesting.
But I'm not. Yeah, I'm not doing much with any sort of cover for season extension. We just maybe I don't try to start quite as early as I used to on certain things. I don't start transplanting anything till April 1st, and I wait till after Mother's Day to plant things that would die from frost. So instead of covering stuff, we just work around the season.
And then what are you doing for weed control on the edge? Because one of the things that I really hated about growing on plastic, and I think this was a personal problem because I know that people do it successfully, but man, getting the weed control right on the edges of the plastic is not as easy as you might think.
It is not as easy as you might think. The best thing that I've got right now is it's a 3-point hitch cultivator that goes on the back of the tractor, and I have 2 of them, but the one that we've upgraded to has gauge wheels, and it just has it has sweeps on it, coming down off of a toolbar. A friend of mine put it together for me just for this purpose, and it's got gauge wheels with the parallelogram, and that's an improvement over just when I had the sweeps on a toolbar on the 3-point hitch, because I don't have to worry about the undulations in the field either going too deep or not deep enough. And we just drive that thing through there until the crops are too tall to be able to do it. And if you get in there at the right time and you go the right speed, it can kind of throw some dirt up on the edges a little bit and just bury the little weeds. Otherwise, well, and even with that system, once the crops get big enough, we end up with weeds in the middles without question. And where it really gets challenging is in staked crops like tomatoes. And, they're in there for so long that managing those weeds in between there, what I end up doing a lot is just, once the weeds get too annoying and hopefully before they go to seed, I rent one of those walk behind, brush mowers, and we can go through and mow them down. I'm thinking this year about planting maybe some ryegrass or something in between there so that to outcompete with the weeds so we don't have as much of a mess. But just getting in there and mowing it really helps a lot. And we used to do it with weed whackers, but we figured out this walk behind brush mowers are way better. And then something like lettuce, I mean, sometimes we miss a cultivation and we still get a lettuce crop. So it's such a short crop in there that it just doesn't really matter.
Right. And then the other thing that I hated about growing on plastic was dealing with it after the crop was done.
Yeah. Yep. So we have, if it's something like lettuce, you can just go down through and actually you can just pull on the drip tape that's centered in the middle and rip it in the middle and pull the plastic up. If there's a lot of weeds, then you really need to have a bed lifter. So we have one of those rain flow bed lifters too. And you drive it through. It's got a coulter in the middle. It splits it down the middle, and then it loosens the plastic on both sides. And our crew can pick it up pretty quick. So, it's a lot of waste. It's a lot of trash, but it's not hard to deal with.
Where are you disposing of the plastic from the fields?
So we just have a local hauling company come and bring us those roll-off dumpsters, and we just put them in there, and then they haul it to the landfill. So, I hauled some the other day in my box truck, and I shouldn't have done that because I got stuck at the dump, and they had to drag me around. But
I like to call that stupid farmer tricks.
Yeah, exactly. First, they had to drag me back to where I needed to dump it, and then they had to drag me back out. So.
Oh, man. Yeah, when you do that, it's like you look and go at the price of the roll-off would have been just, you're not coming out ahead, that's for sure. So are you using different kinds or different colors of plastic for different crops?
We're not really using different colors for different crops, but we are using different colors seasonally. So when we start laying plastic in March, it's all black. And then for stuff that we're transplanting in, June or later, we switch to white. But, in the spring, everything goes on black. And then in the fall, everything goes on white. They did some research, though. I know a lot of people doing tomatoes on white, late plantings and stuff. But even later plantings on tomatoes, the research I've seen, if you can get them established, it seems like maybe black all the time is better. But anyway.
Well, so you mentioned tomatoes, and that seems like a big crop for you guys.
Yeah, we grow. It's not our biggest crop, but I really like to grow tomatoes. And we do grow, several acres of them.
And what kind of a trellising system are you using for the tomatoes?
We use what I guess is called the Florida weave. So wooden sticks, 2 plants stick, and then you come back and loop it around from both sides. Right. And and we grow determinants and indeterminates. And this year I'm buying new sticks for the indeterminates because last year I tried putting 2 of the small sticks together and they kept breaking and falling over. So I'm going to buy some big, like bean sticks for those.
And you said that you're actually succession cropping those field tomatoes.
Yep, oftentimes we do. I think this coming year we're just going to put in 1. But around here you can, the people who really specialize in tomatoes, they do 2 or 3 crops. And we can plant, in May, and then we can plant like once a month until, July or something around here. This year I think I won't. I think I'll just put in 1 just because what can happen is the way our season goes, you can end up just building and building and building in your harvest. Because, you've got the same stuff in the fall as you had in the spring, plus all the fruit crops. So I think we're just going to do that one succession and fill in because I'm trying to get as even labor as I can through the season.
Right. So that you're not having to hire in surges.
Exactly. Yeah. Because that's something that happens to us. And it often turns into a disaster.
So tell me about your labor situation. Where are you guys pulling employees from?
Okay, so our farm workers are all local year-round residents. They all live about 30, 40 minutes to the east, kind of down off the mountains into the foothills. So we're hiring through word of mouth. It's all immigrant, Spanish-speaking population, but it's all year-round residents. So we don't do any sort of labor contractors or anything like that at this point. It's all W-2, on our staff, and it's a seasonal job. So we'll have, in April, we have a few people come on and help start transplanting and stuff. And then once we start harvesting in mid-May, we need 10 plus people. And like I said, we're trying to manage those surges so that we don't, like last year we ended up for a few weeks when we had too much squash all at once. We had like 26 people, and I'd rather have more like 10 people just, for 6 months straight. And it's worked out pretty well for us so far. We get a lot of repeat people every year, and hopefully that'll continue, because once your crew's trained and they know what to do and they know you and you both trust each other, things can go pretty smoothly.
Yeah. I mean, having returning staff is such a huge thing.
It really is. Yeah. I wish we could do year-round employment. That would make the management so much easier of personnel if you could do year-round employment, but I haven't figured that out.
Yeah, that's a whole business structure question. What are you doing? What are you selling? And how are you growing it? All has to fit into that in a seasonal climate. So now you guys are in a really highly visible location. I know one of the pictures that I saw on Instagram, it looks like there's a strip mall across the street from your fields. And I think about, I'm thinking about what's the right neutral term about this? The contentiousness over immigration right now. Do you guys get any pushback from having Hispanics working in the field? Is that something where people look and go, ooh, that must be a bunch of illegals. That must be a bunch of bad hombres or whatever. I mean,
yeah, I've never had any of that to my face. Okay. So, I don't know how much people are really thinking that. For one thing, we're in agriculture, and I think people just there's a big tomato industry around here. People are kind of used to seeing, Latinos and stuff picking tomatoes. So I think they kind of expect it in agriculture. But then the other thing is just that, North Carolina really has attracted a lot of immigrants over the past, 15, 20 years. So I don't know. You got the people out there that might think that, but I think most people are I don't know how to put it. Most people are accepting. I don't know what to say there.
Yeah. Most people aren't getting up in arms about it.
Most people, yeah, I haven't exactly. And and Asheville's we're in the South, there's no question, but especially in the city, it's a pretty unique demographic that lives in Asheville. It's a pretty progressive type city. So people are less likely to worry about ethnicity in that way. I guess that's the right way of putting that.
Right. Working with a Hispanic crew, are you a Spanish speaker? Is that something that you've picked up over the years, or that you came with that skill?
I am not a Spanish speaker, and that's one of the biggest skills I have lacking as a grower at this point. But we have enough people on the crew that speak really, really English well, and we have some leadership on the crew that is good at English, that everything can get translated, and it works out. Like I said, our population that we're hiring is stationary, stable, long-time residents, homeowners, whatever. So a lot of them do speak, English perfectly, or at least quite a bit. And we just end up with, a handful of people now and then that don't speak any English, and then the translating just goes through the people who do.
Is your family involved in the farming operation?
My family is less involved at this point than they were when we lived on the farm. We don't live on any of the farms at this point. So, but, certainly the kids come to the farm and play and stuff like that. And, my children are small. They're 3 and 6. So they're not really, out there. They're not really out there bunching kale all day or anything. My wife Becca does the payroll and handles a lot of the books and helps make the big decisions and things like that. So yeah, the family's involved in that way, but I'm certainly the one that goes to the farm every morning and runs the day-to-day operation.
All right, with that, we're going to turn to our lightning round. First, we're going to get a quick word from one more sponsor. This lightning round, as well as perennial support for the Farmer to Farmer podcast, is brought to you by BCS America. A BCS two-wheel tractor is the only power equipment a market gardener will need, with PTO-driven attachments like the rototiller, the flail mower, the power harrow, rotary plow, snow thrower, log splitter, and more. You name it, you can probably run it with a versatile BCS two-wheel tractor. The first time I used a rototiller way back in 1991, it was mounted to a BCS two-wheel tractor and it spoiled me for life. When you get behind a BCS, you can tell that it's built to the same commercial standards as four-wheeled farm tractors, and it has many of the same features. I've used other tillers and mowers, and I spent most of the time thinking about how much easier it would be with a BCS. Check out bcsamerica.com to see the full lineup of tractors and attachments, plus videos of BCS in action. So, Steven, what's your favorite tool on the farm?
Well, what's my favorite tool on the farm? I guess I'm like everybody. I like new things. I don't have it yet, but I'm shopping for a flail mower right now, so I'm hoping that's going to be my new favorite tool.
I like it. Nice.
Yeah. Now that we're getting into a lot more intensive cover crop management, I hope that's gonna be great.
So, what's your favorite crop to grow?
My favorite crop to grow is probably tomatoes. Maybe kale. I like to grow kale a lot too, but I think I like tomatoes because they're so difficult. So, and they're the crop that keeps, they oftentimes really whack me in the face, but I keep coming back. So I must really like it.
I meant to ask earlier how you guys are harvesting the tomatoes, because, when you're selling direct to consumers, right, you're picking vine ripe tomatoes, stuff that's ready to eat. But once you start, again, backing up that distribution chain, that really changes.
That really changes. Yeah. So our tomatoes, we try to pick them, at what we call breaker stage. And, the fruits don't really get, from my understanding, any more sugar into them after that breaker stage. So we're not picking them green, but we're not picking them fully ripe either, because we need that ripening time in the box. In order, so they can't be soft when they get to the retail level. So that's what we do. We try to pick them at breaker, and we pick them into buckets, and we take them back to our hay wagon where we have to sort and grade them, because they have to be sorted. The box has to all be the same size and the same color in a box. So that's how we do that. And then we have a new customer coming online this year, for whom they're really big in the tomato business. They mostly sell conventional tomatoes. I think we'll probably be one of their only local organic growers. And we're going to pick them into RPCs for them. And then they have mechanized sorting grading equipment. So that's how that'll work for that customer.
Wow, that'll be an interesting change for you guys.
That'll be really interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But we spend a lot of time sorting and grading these things. It's really very difficult to get, a 4x5 box that's all the same color. Takes quite a bit of time, but they've got these machines with cameras and all that kind of stuff that'll do it. So, and we're going to do grape tomatoes for them too, because I don't know how to wash those and sort those by hand. That
right,
I think would be impossible.
Be a little too much. Yeah. And finally, Steven, if you could go back in time and tell your beginning farmer self one thing, what would it be?
Probably to get a 4-wheel tractor sooner. To not worry so much about taking on payments for equipment, and to focus on mechanizing as many things as you can. I think that's what I would tell myself.
Steven, thank you so much for being part of the Farmer to Farmer podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris.
All right. So wrapping things up here, I'll say again, this is episode 156 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast. You can find the notes for the show at farmertofarmerpodcast.com by looking on the episodes page or just searching for Beltram. That's Beltram. The transcript for this episode is brought to you by Earth Tools, providing the most complete selection of walk-behind farming equipment and high-quality garden tools in North America. And by Osborne Quality Seeds, a dedicated partner for growers. Visit osborneseed.com for high-quality seed, industry-leading customer service, and fast order fulfillment. Additional funding for transcripts is provided by North Central SARE, providing grants and education to advance innovations in sustainable agriculture. You can get the show notes for every Farmer to Farmer podcast right in your inbox by signing up for my email newsletter at farmertofarmerpodcast.com. Also, please head on over to iTunes and leave us a review if you enjoy the show, or talk to us in the show notes, or tell your friends on Facebook. We're at Purple Pitchfork on Facebook. And hey, when you talk to our sponsors, please let them know how much you appreciate their support of a resource you value. You can support this show directly by going to farmertofarmerpodcast.com/donate. I am working to make the best farming podcast in the world, and you can help. Finally, please let me know who you would like to hear from on the show through the suggestions form at farmertofarmerpodcast.com, and I will do my best to get them on the show. Thank you for listening. Be safe out there and keep the tractor running.